We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, and the chapter is number 1. And today's verse that I would like to read is just now coming. It's verses number 5 through 7. And because it's a 10, 1, 5 through 7, it's a very long verse. And therefore I'm going to read the translation and the purport. Taking the boat of Krishna's lotus feet, my grandfather Arjuna and others crossed the ocean of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in which such commanders as Bhishmadeva resembled great fish that could very easily have swallowed them. Who's speaking? Maharaj Parikshit, right? Say yes. By the mercy of Lord Krishna, my grandfathers crossed this ocean, which was very difficult to cross, as easily as one steps over the hoofprint of a calf. Because my mother surrendered unto Lord Krishna's lotus feet, the Lord, Sudarshan Chakra in hand, entered her womb and saved my body, the body of the last remaining descendant of the Kurus and Pandavas, which was almost destroyed by the fiery weapon of Ashvatthama. And who's it referring to? Uttara. Lord Sri Krishna appearing within and outside of all materially embodied living beings by his own potency in the forms of eternal time, that is, as Paramatma and as Virat Rupa, gave liberation to everyone, either as cruel death or as life. Kindly enlighten me by describing his transcendental characteristics. Srila Prabhupada's purport, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.58, Samashitaye padapallavaplavam mahatpadam punya yasho marare bhavam bhudir vatsa padam param padam 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 yadvipadam natesham. For one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation and is famous as Murari, or the enemy of the Mura demon, the ocean of the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. His goal is Param Padam, or Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. One who seeks shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna is immediately protected by the Lord, as the Lord promises in Bhagavad Gita 18:66, Ahang tvam sarvapapebhyo mukshisha mimasuchaha. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. By taking shelter of Lord Krishna, one comes under the safest protection. Thus, when the Pandavas took shelter at the lotus feet of Krishna, all of them were on the safe side of the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Parikshit Maharaj therefore felt obliged to think of Krishna in the last days of his life. This is the ideal result of Krishna consciousness, ante narayana smriti. If at the time of death one can remember Krishna, one's life is successful. Parikshit Maharaj therefore, because of his many obligations to Krishna, intelligently decided to think of Krishna constantly during the last days of his life. Krishna had saved the Pandavas, Maharaj Parikshit's grandfathers, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Krishna had saved Maharaj Parikshit himself when he was attacked by the Brahmastra of Ashvatthama. Krishna acted as the friend and worshipable deity of the Pandava family. Moreover, apart from Lord Krishna's personal contact with the Pandavas, Krishna is the super soul of all living entities. And he gives everyone liberation, even if one is not a pure devotee. Kaṁsa, for example, was not at all a devotee, yet Krishna, after killing him, gave him salvation. Krishna consciousness is beneficial to everyone, whether one is a pure devotee or a non-devotee. This is the glory of Krishna consciousness. Considering this, who will not take shelter at the lotus feet of Kṛṣṇa? Kṛṣṇa is described in this verse as Maya Manushya, because he descends exactly like a human being. He is not obliged to come here like karmis or ordinary living beings. Rather, he appears by his own internal energy, swayam sabhavam yatmamayaya, just to show favor to the fallen conditioned souls. Kṛṣṇa is always situated in his original position as Satchidananda Vigraha, and anyone who renders service to him is also situated in his original spiritual identity. Swarupena vyavastitihi. This is the highest perfection of human life. And this first chapter of the 10th canto is the description of how Kṛṣṇa, at long last, is appearing personally here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How he appears personally on this planet. And there is a build-up before his appearance of demoniac forces. Kṛṣṇa in the Bhagavad Gita describes how they are divine and demoniac. People are of divine and demoniac natures. And when there's an imbalance, Kṛṣṇa comes to rebalance so that there's a harmonious situation in the universe, in the world, so that the devotees can take advantage of the human form of life and make advancement. Therefore, in the Gita, Kṛṣṇa says, Pranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavam yuge yuge. And he's coming on schedule to uplift the devotees and to cut down the unnecessary elements in the world. So we find in this first chapter that Bhumi, earth personified, is feeling a great burden. There's a section in the later cantos of the Bhagavatam, it's either 11th or 12th, the Bhumi Gita, where she describes, does Bhumi, the audacity of kings. And this is one of the aspects of the Bhagavatam leading up to Kṛṣṇa's appearance, is the degradation of the kingly caste. The degradation of the population comes by worse and worse leadership. And as Kali Yuga approaches, a Samskrita Kriyahina, we find that the kingly class has no good samskars, and they're without any reformatory processes. They're simply materialistic. And it leads to deprivation of all good qualities for people in general, and they suffer. So Bhumi in the 11th canto describes how, although people are born in this world, even if they have long-ish durations of life, from her perspective, I mean, really, if you think of geological time, compared to the lifetime of any living entity, it's a flash. Yet, when they appear, they are bent on conquering the earth, she says. And in doing so, they spill blood. They're so eager to own territory and name it after themselves and control it. We know through history of all the different conquerors who've reached out, said, this land is mine, that's my land also. In fact, as a kid, they taught us this song in America, this land is my land, this land is your land. It turns out it wasn't ours at all. Bhaktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram belongs to Kṛṣṇa. But there's a way in which when people get power, there's Michel's iron laws of oligarchy, which talk about the ways in which human beings who are weak of heart, become more and more attached to controlling, and they try to protect their position. So Bhumi sees that all these people fight against each other, they kill one another, they spill blood, they kill millions of people. She said, but from my perspective, they're only here for a few minutes. And she said, even when they conquer the land, then they're not satisfied. They say, we want the water too. These oceans are ours also. She said, how can you own the land or the water? They don't belong to you, they belong to Krishna. And the Bhagavatam describes how there was a buildup of these demoniac elements, and they were, many of them, taking refuge here on the earthly planet. And so there was a great disturbance at that time. So Bhumi went to her temple president, or GBC Brahma, and mentioned that I'm feeling overburdened. And Brahma then escalated it by getting together with the devas, other rulers of the universe, and they gathered at the ocean of milk. While we were at the ocean in Puri the other day, Kuranath Prabhu remembered, as many of us were making, sharing reflections of the moment, how Bhumi, the demigods, had all gone to the milk ocean to propitiate Krishna and ask for his help. And he, Kuranath, was thinking of the ways in which there's some special quality to the shore of the ocean. Seems to be great possibility, calling out to the horizon for help, knowing that Krishna is there. And so did the demigods do this at the milk ocean. In fact, they had Brahma as their leader, and together they chanted one of the first prayers of the Vedas from the Rig Veda, the Purush Sukta. And after singing the Purush Sukta, purposefully begging for Krishna's assistance and wishing him to descend to the world, he transmitted a message to the heart of Brahma. And Brahma subsequently transmitted that message to all the demigods. Part of that message was that he will soon appear in the world. And furthermore, he said, all of you demigods and demigoddesses and all of your families should similarly appear on the earth planet to assist me, a principle that Prabhupada notes in the Krishna book as tat priyartam, that Krishna doesn't come alone, he comes with his followers to assist him. And they, the demigods, their wives, and other controllers in the universe would appear first to set the stage for Krishna. And in Queen Kunti's prayer, she mentioned, Maya javani kachanan agnad hoksajan avyayam nalakshya se mudadrisha nato natya royata. Kunti's praying to Krishna and says, oh Krishna, seems as if you're an actor on a stage. You set a stage and you come disguised in many different ways, and you perform your leela. And we've heard also by now, those who are reading the Bhagavatam up to the 10th canto where we're just reading from today, that by hearing of Krishna's play here in the material world, one becomes liberated just by hearing. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvata tyakva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorjuna. When one becomes acquainted with Krishna's nature and how when he appears in the world it's not ordinary, he's not forced to come to the world as an ordinary living being is compelled by material nature to enter a particular womb based on karma. Daiva netrina. It's like if you get arrested in the parking lot of a Walmart. Can't think of anything worse than that. And you have handcuffs and they push you in the car. Once you're in there, you're going where they're going. And similarly, those who are arrested by the material nature are handcuffed. When they leave this body, they're helplessly pushed into a situation that is decided for them. And it's beyond their free will at that point. They have to take birth in a certain body. But Krishna's not like that. Krishna is eternally free because he's the controller of all energies, the source of all energies. And when he appears in the world, he does so by his own sweet will, Prabhupada's phraseology. What to speak of his activities? The conditioned soul acts according to his or her swabhava, which means nature, acquired from previous associations. Purusha prakritisto hi bhunte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. It's the way in which, because of one's association with the material nature, one has a predisposition to various sense objects in this world. What to speak of? Material nature gives one a customized set of senses. Shariram yaravapnoti yachyap yukramatishvara grihit vaitani samyati vayurgandam iva bhashayat shotram chakshu sparsharam cha rasanam granam evacha adishtayam manaschayam vishayan upasevate, which means that whatever you remember when you leave this body, whatever your primary interest is in life, material nature fully accommodates you. And Patanjali Muni in the Yoga Sutras says that the body that you have now is the result of the filling in of your desires from your last life. And there's an example he gives about if you leave footprints in wet sand and you look back, you see the footprints, those are yours. And then if you were to fill those in with plaster of Paris, then you'd get a perfect mold of your foot. So when we leave the present body, there's a way in which our aggregate of desires makes a profile. We can understand this handily because of AI. And we know that everything we're doing and choosing online is being aggregated. And then there's a presentation given to us by the algorithm of the AI that says, no, you like this. We know you like this because you looked at that picture a millisecond longer than this one. And they said, you prefer this color over that color and blah, blah, blah. And material nature is AI based on Krishna's design and intelligence. Many of the technologies are just mimicking what's already going on in nature. And Krishna's not like that. He comes of his own accord. An example Prabhupada gives is that when a governor comes in to visit a prison, other prisoners may look at him or her and say, oh, you're just like us. But there's a big difference. And I've felt that difference myself because I went to prison to visit someone in Arizona. And when the door closed, it was a big door, I was reminding the guards that, I walked in here on my own free will, right? You remember? There was a visceral sense when the door closed that living entities don't like to lose their free will. I was a little nervous being in there. And those who are in the material world are subjected to the laws of nature, but Krishna's not. Janma karma tame divyam. His birth in the world is by his free choice. And he's not restricted, or he's not following an algorithm from material nature, which is predisposing him to certain types of sense objects. Some people, they're liberals, some people are conservatives, some people like folk music, other people like, I won't mention all different kinds of music because it's very triggering, but it's there. And I know when I hear certain kinds of music, I'm not attracted to it, and other kinds I identify with because maybe my father played it when I was a kid. And all these are conditions of the mind. But Krishna doesn't have those. He's completely transcendental. So the process of bhakti is included in this verse, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvata, that as we discussed in Jagannath Puri quite a bit, the idea of tattva. Tattva means understanding the difference between one category and another and not making a mistake in the categories. So we're in a category, we're called jiva tattva or tatastha. And Krishna's in another category. What's that category called? That tattva? Vishnu tattva. And then there's a third tattva called maya tattva, the material nature. And Lord Chaitanya had brought up these categories when he was teaching Sanatana Goswami. And he quoted from the Vishnu Purana, Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Gyakya Tatapara Avidya Karma Sangyanya Tritiya Shakti Rishite. These are various categories, and you should get them right. You should understand what's what. If you think, oh, I'm God and I'm free, you made a category mistake, because you're not God, and you're not free to do whatever you want until you're liberated. And then there's a category mistake if you think you're your body. That's a big category mistake, because you're not your body. You're a spiritual being inhabiting a body. You're a kshetragya, which means you can be aware of your body, but you can't be your body, because they're two different energies. So don't make category mistakes like that. So tattva deham punar janma naiti. Krishna says, if you get all these things right, and you understand your relationship with me, tattva deham punar janma naiti mameti sorjana, then you also become free. So this is the benefit of hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and hearing about Krishna's appearance in the world. So after the demigods prayed to Krishna, along with Brahma, and received their instructions, and Krishna made his advent dramatically. There's the way in which a scene opens in the beginning of the Bhagavatam of Vasudeva and Devakī. And it's a happy occasion, apparently, coming home from their wedding. And on the chariot, they have the assistance of Kaṁsa, who's the sister of Devakī, the brother of Devakī. And he's driving the chariot out of a sense of love for his sister, and which he has really none, as we'll find out. Because when there's a prophecy that comes from an Akashvani, which is used in this context of Leela, that there's a voice, unembodied voice from the sky, and it proclaims out loud, so Kaṁsa can hear it, everyone else can hear it, that you're a fool, Kaṁsa, because the 8th son of your sister is going to kill you. And when Kaṁsa hears that, he drops the reins, grabs the hair of his sister. Imagine, she's just coming from being married, and pulls his sword. And he thinks, I'll annihilate my sister, because that way I'll short circuit the divine plan that has been announced through the Akashvani. And at this point, Vasudeva pleads with Kaṁsa that this is not a great idea. It's your sister. Kaṁsa didn't care. He pleaded on the basis of you're going to get a bad reaction, but those in the modes of passion and ignorance have a hard time with causality. They just know, I want what I want now. And they don't care so much for results in the future, what might happen. And finally, Vasudeva pleaded that on the basis of your reputation, which had slight effect on Kaṁsa, but he was so surrounded by demoniac advisors that he had a lot of support for his demoniac activities. But finally, Vasudeva had this mystic potency. This is something else interesting in the Yoga Sutras. There's a whole chapter on mystic powers. There's a similar chapter in the Bhagavatam, in the Uddhava Gita, Krishna speaking to Uddhava about how you get mystic powers and what they are. And one of them is that whatever you say, everyone believes. And you get that by being avowedly truthful. You never shade the truth, you always tell the truth. And your voice, your words have deep potency. So Vasudeva had that power. He always told the truth. And he told Kaṁsa that allow her to have children, I'll hand him over to you. You can decide at that time. Besides the 8th son, not the first one, and you can be in control of the situation. And Kaṁsa trusted him. So he said, okay. And he let them go back to their home. What a wedding conclusion, a conclusion to a wedding. And this was an atmosphere that pervaded Mathura at the time, because Kaṁsa had imprisoned his own father. He had garnered strength from making alliances with other kings, even people who were competitors and who were against Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa had this demoniac power, and power corrupts people. When they get in power, not only do they feel invincible, but then other people around them, they don't want to lose their power. That's a problem. And therefore, demoniac people who are attached to power, they're able to pull in weaker people who then support them because they have a vested interest and they're afraid to lose it, so they keep their power. That repeats itself again and again in the material world. The cheaters and the cheated. And so Kaṁsa had this alliance with many kings, and the ones that didn't align with him he killed or put in prison. There was a sense of tyranny. And meanwhile, Vasudeva and Devakī gave birth, one after another, to sons. And true to his word, Vasudeva handed over each one of the children to Kaṁsa. At first he said, oh, okay, it's no big deal. You can take them back. But then his associates, his so-called counselors, ministers, said, and what to speak of Narada, was also giving some impetus for Kaṁsa to step up his carnage, because Narada's idea was that the faster this goes, the sooner Krishna will appear. So he was egging Kaṁsa that any of the children could actually, you can't be too careful. And what to speak of his ministers, who had their other ideas that, like, let's be really sure that they're all killed. So he started killing the children one after another. And there's a backstory to the children. One may think, oh, this is a pretty bloody drama going on here. And the whole material world appears to be a pretty bloody drama. But there is a purpose behind it. Karmana daivanetrena jantur deho papate striya pravishta udaram pumsoreta kanashraya. Kapila Dev says, there's an oversight to the movement of every living being, which womb you end up in, how you're born into a particular place. And high-minded people, through guidance of Shastra, can come to understand that everything has a purpose. The whole universe has a purpose. It's meant for me, ultimately, to come to my highest potential as an eternal servant of Krishna. And devotees even think that whatever happens to them is the mercy of Krishna. And that's true for everyone. Even Maya is there purposefully to remind living entities that this isn't their home, and to urge them along to take shelter of Krishna. Some take longer than others to come to that conclusion. Bahunam jamanamante gyanavamam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabha. The sons of Devakī were called the ṣaḍ-garbhāsuras. They had offended in their last life. They had made offense and been cursed to take birth in such a way that they would be killed one after another, and then they would be free from the curse. And the important aspect, besides the convoluted nature of how they were cursed and how they appeared, which I'm going to skip over, Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura, Prabhupada gives the commentary following Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura's explanation that these ṣaḍ-garbhāsuras, ṣaḍ means 6, ṣaḍ, garbha, womb, asuras, they were born into Devakī's womb because of a curse, but they're representative of Anarthas, unwanted habits and sentiments that are deeply rooted within the heart of someone who's been hanging around the material world since time immemorial. And those must be overcome before one can invite Krishna into one's life. And they represent kāma, krodha, lobha, mada, moha, and mātsarya. These dastardly 6, which are the enemies of the soul. And Devakī was afraid of Kaṁsa for good reason. And Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura says that we, as practitioners of bhakti, should be similarly afraid of material nature. If we think that I'm okay, which a lot of people say, we hear when we go to distribute books. If you attempt to show somebody, the hand comes out and say, no, I'm okay. But there's a way in which we're not really okay, because we're in the grips of material nature, and we need to take shelter of Kṛṣṇa. And so Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura says, when you have a sense of fear of the material nature, as Devakī did, have fear for Kaṁsa and the protection of her children. And if one has that, then that fear of material nature is an inspiration to become more dedicated to one's practice of bhakti. And he says that combination of fear and one's earnestness in practicing bhakti will similarly kill these 6 unwanted elements within the heart. And after the 6, there was an apparent miscarriage because Lord Balaram appeared in the womb of Devakī, but then he's called Sankarshan because he was attracted to the womb of Rohini, same husband, Vasudeva. And it appeared that she, Devakī, had had a miscarriage. So how this must have concerned Kaṁsa, because he was really keeping count. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She has a miscarriage. Do you count that or not? And this is the way of material life, because people are calculating how to keep their wealth or plan everything in order, and in order to be happy in this world. But there's always a glitch. And whatever we think is going to protect us, whatever plan we have, Shukadeva has already said earlier in the Bhagavatam, Deha patra kalatradeshu atmasainisa satsapi tesham pramato nidhanam pashanapina pashyati. Whatever ideas you have, basically, he says, for your protection and the plan to make it through this material world unscathed, they're not going to work out. And that's the theme of this verse today. That entering into the Kurukshetra, the great warriors, Arjuna, Pandavas, they were up against insurmountable odds, much bigger army, really dangerous situation. And because they took shelter of Kṛṣṇa, they were okay. they were protected. And Prabhupada urges in the purport something that Krishna urges, is sarvadharman parityaja. Just give up all the ideas for getting your ducks in a row and surrender to me. And ducks don't stay in a row here in this world. And so after the miscarriage, he wasn't sure about the count. And then the 8th pregnancy came, and Krishna appeared in the prison, but he appeared with 4 arms. And Vasudeva and Devakī prayed to him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But counterintuitively, Devakī said, please take the form of a child, because I'm afraid Kaṁsa will notice that you're here as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's interesting because Kaṁsa was already killing babies. So she had this angst about protecting Krishna. And Krishna works through his potency. So by his internal potency called Yogamaya, he was able to, he easily put the guards to sleep. The shackles fell off from Vasudeva. And he took the baby. Krishna did take the form of a small baby in his arms, and he carried the baby across Jamuna. There was a storm that night, and it was treacherous. And he went to the home of Nanda Yashoda. They were also celebrating the fact that Yashoda had given birth. Now here's a mysterious aspect of Krishna's appearance, because according to our acharyas, Yashoda gave birth to twins. And one of them was a boy, Krishna, and the other was a girl, who was Yogamaya. And when Vasudeva came to the house on the instruction of Krishna, who he was carrying, the baby he was carrying, who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in one of his aspects, merged into the body of baby Krishna. Because Krishna is the source of all avatars. Ete shamcha kalapumsam krishnastu bhagavan swayam. Indrari vyakulam lokam radayanti yuge yuge. A stone of the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. All other incarnations come from Krishna. And then he picked up the girl, and he brought her back to the prison, put back the shackles, and the next morning Kaṁsa found a girl was born. And that was confusing also. And so she pleaded for her life, although she didn't have to because she was all powerful, as a Shakti of the Lord. But Kaṁsa tried to kill her too. She flew up in the air and chastised Kaṁsa. That you're a fool, and already the child you're after is somewhere else. Meanwhile, when Yashoda awoke, there was a sense of, okay, we have a baby boy. And she hadn't remembered the child labor and so forth, but there was a celebration going on there in the home of Nanda and Yashoda. And 100 days later, which is the astrological time in which one's supposed to do a name-giving ceremony, Gargamuni came to the house of Nanda Maharaj. And Nanda Maharaj worshipped him as he was a great soul. It's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, these great souls come to a home just to purify one's house. And he said, and it was Gargamuni, that we shouldn't have this out in the open, because then Kaṁsa will figure out that there's a name-giving ceremony going on, he'll trace it back to the time, and then he'll come here looking for Krishna. So they went to the cowshed. And there in the cowshed, Gargamuni said, as you could see from his astrological findings, besides he was a great devotee, he hinted that this child is going to be as good as Narayan. And also he said, protect him. He's really, really a special child. And he hinted at his godhood, asanvarnantrayo yasya grinati nuyugantanum shuklo raktistha pita idanim krishnatam yata gataha. There's a way in which he said, this child comes in different colors in different yugas, and so forth. And then he gave them, it was a name-giving ceremony. And of course, Balaram was there, also for the name-giving, and he gave the names to Krishna, Balaram. And then their childhood pastimes began there.